Hello ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to my review of The 39 Steps 1978, the 1978 film adaptation of the novel The 39 Steps. So I think this adaptation is closer to the original book than the Hitchcock version was, and there was apparently a shot-by-shot remake of the Hitchcock version, but in colour, that was made in the 50s. A bit like the Psycho one from the 90s. Um, But anyway, so the 78 one feels a bit more like a spy thriller than the Hitchcock one. That one was a spy thriller, but this one I think is a bit more tense. Um, and definitely get the threat a bit more dangerous, I think. The film starts with a spy worried about what's happening in Europe and enemy agents on the loose, and there are two murders happening. So the agent, fearing for his own life, gets as much information as he can to his neighbour Richard Hannay, as well as send some other information to where Hannay's going up in Scotland. However, the spy is then murdered by enemy agents who are in league with a traitor in the British hierarchy. Um, I say hierarchy, the government or something, the British government or Secret Service or whatever. But there's a traitor within them, and they're in charge of this small group of enemy spies. And a pair of enemy spies kill the British spy and make it look like Hannay had committed the crime. So Hannay is arrested for murder. However, the enemy spies get him out and try to work out where the first spy had hidden his thing. However, Hannay escapes and heads up to Scotland to continue his mission with both enemy spies and the police after him. So it's a race against time and a running over Scotland in order for Hannay to locate the spy's notebook that he posted to be sent off to Scotland for Hannay to uncover, and to inform the police and the Secret Service of this plot before the enemy spies' plan can come to fruition. So that's basically the 39 Steps. It's 1978. And I think this one is a better adaptation of the book than the Hitchcock version. I think Hitchcock's one was a bit of a slower film, which could work in terms of an atmosphere, but I don't think it worked very well with pacing. I also think this version is not only better paced, but it's also more tense and suspenseful, and you feel the tenseness of the characters going through it. I think it does deviate from the book slightly. For instance, they don't go over the Fourth Bridge, unless that was a change for the Hitchcock film, and I think the ending is very different to where they when they go to Big Ben for the climax. I don't think that was in the book. I also don't think in the book Hannay had a love interest. I'm not quite sure about that. I haven't read the original book. I saw a play version inspired by the Hitchcock film a few years back, and then I saw the Hitchcock film, and now this version. But based on those, this one is probably closer to the book, I think, than the Hitchcock film, possibly apart from the ending. Whether the Fourth Bridge was the one used in the book, I'm not quite certain. It's been used in other adaptations, so probably this one they just changed it to a normal bridge up near Dumfries, I believe, or on the line towards Dumfries, um, which is a bit different to what it is in the other versions. And if the book also does not have a love interest, this one does. This film does have its own love interest in the form of a character played by the girl who played Jane in Mary Poppins, Karen Droys, I believe. Can't remember precisely, but the actress who plays Jane in Mary Poppins is playing the love interest in this film, which is interesting. And she and her fiance are they're up in Scotland. They're at an estate where Hannay meets them as part of his journey, and then later they're at a meeting for the Liberal Democrat Party, I believe it is, where Hannay has to pretend to be the speaker to avoid being assassinated by the enemy spies or being hunted by the police. And later he keeps bumping into these this woman and her fiance. He meets them at a party when he's captured by the enemy spies, and then they team up with each other to try and solve the mystery. Especially when both of them help him out, but then the fiance gets killed when Hannay and the woman are recovering the black notebook, and so they have to escape. The spies believe them to be dead, but they managed Hannay to be dead, but they manage to get to the police inspector who's leading the investigation against Hanny, and eventually get themselves down to central London to inform the spy headquarters, and eventually have to try and come up with a way to stop the plot. And it's also interesting to know that the spy leader, the person in charge, is kidnapped by the villains as well as the love interest, and the villain impersonates the head spy person before activating their plans. So there's a lot going on, but it works really well. I also think that this film takes quite a bit of inspiration from Bond. Not to say it's a James Bond ripoff, not by any means of the imagination, but I think there's some inspirations like the faster pace and the more suspenseful threat, and of course, Robert Powell, who plays Hanny, looks absolutely smashing in that tuxedo or dinner jacket. He could honestly have been James Bond after Roger Moore had left, depending on when Roger Moore would have left. Because this was 1978, Roger Moore could easily have left after 4 or 5 films, but as we know, he actually went on to do 7 films. And after Pierce Brosnan was unable to take the role up in 1987 due to commitments to Remington Steele, Timothy Dalton succeeded Roger Moore. So, yeah, it would have been interesting to see if Robert Powell would have been on the list of contenders back in the early 80s. And ultimately, he either lost the chance or didn't sign up to be Bond in 87. But Robert Powell, I think he could have made a good Bond, and this film certainly would be a good resume. I believe it's like Remington Steele for Pierce Brosnan. It's a good and possibly layer cake for Daniel Craig. A good showcase of what it could be, how their Bonds could be like, or what could inspire them. But that's just me personally thinking maybe he could have been Bond, and maybe the film takes some inspirations from Bond, not to be a rip-off or anything. It's just inspired, perhaps, but it's certainly its own thing. It's its own thing based on a novel, of course. Speaking of Robert Powell, I think he is brilliant in the film. I think he is a great actor and is really great as Hanny. He doesn't have the pencil moustache. I'm not sure if that was in the book, but that was definitely for the Hitchcock version. But he's certainly a greatly distinguished looking person, and also a very charismatic and enjoyable lead actor, and he does a brilliant job in the main role, as does Karen Troyes as the love interest. As for anyone else, well, I recognise a couple of names from other films or other TV shows that they've done, like David Warner is second listing on the billing in this film, but I cannot for the life of me know who anybody else is from the faces. Even Karen Troyes I couldn't recognise immediately. So, yeah, maybe Lord Appleton, the villain, is David Warner's character, or maybe he's one of the people one of the spies. But I cannot for the life of me tell which one's David Warner, and I cannot tell which one's other people. I know I recognise Andrew Keir's name on the list after because he was in one of the Dalek movies. There's probably one or two other people I recognise the names of, but I didn't recognise the faces of. However, the actors for all of the characters do a really great job, especially the villains. They are really great, and the spy at the very start is also really good. And also, I liked the fiance of Karen Troyes' character. Sadly, he died, but ultimately, I knew she was going to end up with Hanny, so it was inevitable that he was either going to die, or was going to be revealed as a villain, or she was going to leave him. Something was going to happen to him. But I was actually surprised how much of an involvement he had in the story as one of Hanny's friends and helpers, and ultimately, he did pay the price. Sadly, it was off screen, so you didn't get to see that. Maybe it was a deleted scene, I'm not quite sure, but maybe it was supposed to be more suspenseful, as it was. The cinematography is also really nicely done, and there's a lot of great location shooting on Scotland. And both cinematography and editing really give the suspenseful and energetic feel of a spy thriller, espionage thriller. And I think the music also contributes really well to this, and I think the direction is splendidly done. Is it perfect? I'm not quite sure. It might be a little bit slow in the running across Scotland scenes, which may have been the slower parts of the story in the first place. And I think the start also takes its time to build up, but it's still really done in a suspenseful and powerful way. And it's an enjoyable enjoyable film. The climax is also amazing. It may be different from the book, but it is intense and thrilling as Hanny tries to stop Big Ben from reaching quarter to 11 or quarter to 12. Um, in order to stop a bomb going off, and it is a really suspenseful moment. And at the same time, the police are having a shootout with the two enemy spies who were previously pursuing him, and also the love interest and the head spy person, who, in another Bond influence, is a bit like M. But again, it's not the same. It's just maybe inspirations from, or maybe it's just very similar. But no direct copying and no rip-off. It's its own thing. It's just maybe an influence or just very similar. Anyway, those two have been kidnapped by the main villain, who is attempting to escape. And it's quite an intense finale as Hanny is trying all he can to try and stop the clock from reaching quarter to 11 or 12 from the bomb, so the bomb doesn't go off. That being said, the enemy spies are a bit dumb for staying where they are because otherwise they might be killed. But nevertheless, the ending is intense and thrilling. Although, once Capitum is captured, that's it. There's some text like at the start, which is telling the audience setting what's going on before some characters start talking about it, and then the end has a bit of text explaining what's just that Lord Appleton was tried for treason and was tried for treason and murder, and that thanks to Hanny's actions, that Britain and France were better prepared for World War One when it came around. The plot is taking place in the year 1914. And it also ends with Hanny and the love interest together. Whether they're married or not by this point is uncertain. It's just the final shot of them together in a garden. Perhaps the ending could have had a little bit longer at the very, very end to wrap up everything. But I think the climax itself was magnificent and possibly the best bit of the film. Despite the rest of the film being incredibly tense and well-paced in terms of spy thriller, but this ending was extremely exciting and tense and thrilling. Overall, I think The 39 Steps 1978 is a brilliant film, a great adaptation of the book, even if it changes some stuff, or at least the ending is definitely very different from what I've heard. And I think it's an improvement over the Hitchcock film. I think the Hitchcock film was just a bit too slow, and the ending of that one, whilst the ending at the theatre is really good, it just stops. Right there, it just stops. There's no follow-up. At least this one has a longer climax and actually tells us a little bit of what happened, even if it doesn't show it. And also the play version I saw back, it was up in Cambridge a few years ago. That one actually extended the ending and wrapped up the story in a nice little package. So, the Hitchcock one, I don't know why, but it just decided to stop right there. There was no wrap-up. There was no proper wrap-up. There was no Hanny explaining to the police or the Secret Service about anything. It was no actual tying anything up. And it just felt like the story was there's still a little bit left to go. There was still a little bit to go. They captured the assassin, but that was about it. At least the play version I saw managed to actually wrap up the story in a way. And this version definitely wraps up the story and even gives us a little bit of a text at the very end to say a little bit of what happened next. So that is a massive improvement on the Hitchcock version. The ending is not just the climax, the actual ending is a massive improvement. So with all of that in mind, I'm going to be giving The 39 Steps 1978 a 9 out of 10. I did consider the 8 out of 10 score, but I think it's just a really well put together movie and a really tense thriller. So that's what bumped it up to a 9, and I think you'll have a good time with it. It might be a bit slow in some places, but it's very tentful in many others. Definitely putting the right atmosphere into the film. When I saw it, it was actually that time recording is nearly 3 weeks ago. So at the time of this coming out, it might be about 3 weeks. But I missed the first 20 to 30 minutes, so I had to catch up with that, which I recently did, which is why I'm recording this review so late. But yeah, that start definitely has a lot of tentful moments as well. Um, so that's it from me. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time for my next review, which I've already recorded and edited because I saw this film after this one. It was the next day. Alive and Kicking, a British comedy set on an Irish island. And then after that, I'll be reviewing the 1958-59, which, funny enough, is the same year as Alive and Kicking. I'll be reviewing the 1959 Hammer horror film The Hound of the Baskervilles, starring Peter Cushing, which I saw yesterday at time recording. So I'll see you guys next time for Alive and Kicking, then for The Hound of the Baskervilles, 1959. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel. So, in this adaptation, I think this one's closer to what the original book was going for rather than what Hitchcock's film. So there's a lot going on in this film, but it works really well. But as we know, he actually went, and eventually Timothy Dalton took over after Pierce Brosnan was unable to and Timothy, so I think it was Sam Bobbin or something, who was lined up to follow up from Roger Moore for Octopussy before he came back, and ultimately he just didn't sign up for, and definitely really and definitely a very but anyway, it's quite intense. Overall, I think the 39 Steps 1950. Overall, I believe I'll see you guys next time for